The cruelest rooms are usually the most beautiful ones. Claire Bennett realized that the second she stepped into the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Charity Gala. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above hundreds of wealthy guests dressed in black tuxedos and designer gowns worth more than 6 months of her rent, while soft piano music floated through the air like the room itself had never known struggle. Claire stood near the entrance for half a second too long, clutching the small silver purse she had borrowed from her coworker, suddenly aware that her dark blue dress was outdated by at least 3 seasons. She had spent nearly an hour fixing the loose hem herself in her apartment bathroom, while her 5-year-old daughter colored quietly on the floor beside her. She had promised Lily this event mattered. If tonight went well, maybe the donors would approve the children's hospital grant her department desperately needed. Maybe the overtime checks would finally continue through winter. Maybe she could stop pretending the unpaid medical bills stacked in her kitchen drawer didn't exist. A waiter passed carrying champagne, and Claire instinctively stepped aside, trying not to draw attention to herself. But attention found her anyway. "Excuse me," a sharp female voice called out nearby. Claire turned to see a blonde woman in an emerald gown looking her up and down with a smile too polished to be kind. "The staff entrance is through the east hallway." A few nearby guests chuckled softly. Claire forced a polite smile. "I'm actually here with the Ashton Foundation." "Oh." The woman lifted her eyebrows slowly. "That's surprising." More quiet laughter followed. Claire felt heat crawl into her face as conversations around her subtly shifted. Eyes lingered too long. Men in tailored suits glanced at her before returning to their drinks. Women whispered behind sparkling glasses of champagne. She had seen this look before. At school fundraisers. At hospital waiting rooms. At every place where money decided whether a person deserved respect. Claire lowered her gaze and reached for the event badge in her purse, wanting proof that she belonged there, but before she could pull it out, someone brushed against her shoulder hard enough to spill red wine down the front of her dress. Gasps spread immediately. The crimson stain bloomed across the blue fabric like a wound. "Oh no," the same blonde woman said without sounding sorry at all. "These crowded events can be difficult if you're not used to them." Claire froze. Every eye in the area settled onto her now. She grabbed a napkin from a passing tray and tried wiping the stain, but it only spread further. The humiliation hit harder because she knew exactly what everyone was thinking. She looked out of place. Too poor. Too nervous. Too ordinary for this room. Maybe she should leave before photos start. Another woman whispered, not quietly enough. Claire swallowed hard and nodded to herself once. She could survive embarrassment. She had survived eviction notices, hospital nights, and crying silently in grocery store parking lots after her card declined. But standing in this glittering ballroom while strangers dissected her dignity piece by piece suddenly felt unbearable. She turned toward the exit. Then the room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for every conversation to slow. Claire noticed several guests straighten instinctively. Heads turned toward the staircase overlooking the ballroom. A tall man in a black tailored suit descended the marble steps with calm, effortless authority. He moved without hurry, yet people shifted aside before he even reached them. Claire didn't recognize him immediately, but everyone else clearly did. The blonde woman beside her suddenly lost color in her face. Someone murmured under their breath, "That's Ethan Calloway." The name landed across the ballroom like thunder wrapped in silk. CEO of Calloway Holdings. Billionaire investor. The man magazines called untouchable. Ethan barely acknowledged anyone around him. His expression remained unreadable as his eyes moved across the crowd once, then stopped directly on Claire. She immediately looked away, embarrassed by the stain on her dress. Of course a man like that would notice someone ruining the atmosphere. Her fingers tightened around her purse as she prepared to walk faster toward the exit. But before she could take another step, she heard polished shoes stop beside her. Silence spread outward in invisible waves. Claire looked up slowly. Ethan Calloway stood close enough now that she could see the sharp lines of his face and the cold gray of his eyes. Yet there was something else there too. Something unsettlingly focused. His gaze dropped briefly to the wine stain on her dress before returning to her face. Then, without asking permission, he reached for her trembling hand. The entire ballroom stopped breathing. Claire's pulse stumbled as his fingers closed gently around hers. Warm, steady, certain. Ethan looked at her as though the hundreds of people around them no longer existed. Then, in a low voice that somehow carried through the silent ballroom anyway, he said, "Stay beside me." Do you know what happens when a powerful man notices someone invisible? Everyone else suddenly pretends they saw her all along. Claire could barely breathe as Ethan Calloway's hand remained wrapped around hers in the center of the ballroom. The warmth of his touch felt unreal against the cold humiliation still lingering in her chest. Around them, silence stretched across the gala like glass ready to crack. The same guests who had laughed moments ago now looked terrified of saying the wrong thing. Claire noticed it immediately. The blonde woman in the emerald dress forced an awkward smile and lifted her champagne glass slightly. "Mr. Calloway, I did not realize Miss Bennett was with you tonight." Ethan did not even look at her. His attention stayed on Claire, calm and unreadable, as though the entire ballroom existed somewhere far behind her shoulder. "She is now," he said quietly. A chill moved through the crowd. Claire felt every eye in the room shift again, but differently this time. Not mockery, calculation, curiosity. People were trying to solve a puzzle they did not understand. Why would Ethan Calloway choose her? Claire swallowed hard. "Mr. Calloway," she whispered carefully, trying not to panic. "I think there is some misunderstanding." "There is," he replied smoothly. "But not from you." Before Claire could respond, Ethan guided her forward with effortless confidence. The crowd parted instantly. Men who probably owned half the city stepped aside without hesitation. Women who had ignored Claire minutes ago suddenly smiled at her with polished warmth. It made her stomach twist. Nothing about her had changed except the man standing beside her. A server approached nervously with fresh champagne, and Ethan took a glass for Claire before she could refuse. "Thank you," she said softly. "You do not have to thank me for basic decency." The sentence hit harder than she expected. Claire lowered her gaze quickly, embarrassed by the sudden emotion burning behind her eyes. It had been a long time since anyone defended her without wanting something in return. Ethan led her toward the center section near the orchestra where the wealthiest donors were gathered. Every step felt dangerous. Claire could almost hear whispers following them. "Who is she? Has he been seeing someone? I heard he never attends with women. She does not look like his type." Claire tightened her grip on the champagne glass. She should leave. She absolutely should leave. Yet somehow, every time she considered stepping away, Ethan's calm presence beside her made the ballroom feel slightly less cruel. As they stopped near the donor tables, an older man greeted Ethan immediately. "Calloway, good to finally see you here." Ethan nodded once. "Senator." The senator's eyes moved toward Claire with open curiosity. "And this is?" Claire opened her mouth, already preparing to awkwardly introduce herself, but Ethan answered first. "Claire Bennett." Nothing else. No explanation. No label. Yet somehow the simplicity of it carried strange weight, as though her name alone was enough. The senator smiled politely at her after that. Not warmly, not genuinely, but respectfully. Claire hated herself a little for noticing the difference. Music swelled softly through the ballroom, while photographers captured the event from every angle. Claire tried not to look toward the cameras. The wine stain still spread across the front of her dress, despite her attempts to hide it with her purse. Ethan noticed her discomfort almost immediately. "You are worried about the dress," he said. Claire gave a nervous laugh. It is difficult not to be. To her surprise, the corner of his mouth moved slightly, almost becoming a smile. "Most people here are worried about their reputations. Your priorities are refreshing." Claire looked up at him fully for the first time. There was no mockery in his expression, no pity either. Somehow that unsettled her even more. "Why are you helping me?" she asked carefully. Ethan's gaze lingered on her face for one silent moment too long. "Because leaving you alone in this room would have been unacceptable." The answer should not have affected her as deeply as it did. Before Claire could think of what to say next, flashes from nearby cameras suddenly brightened the ballroom. Reporters near the entrance had started noticing them together. Murmurs grew louder. Claire instinctively stepped back, but Ethan's hand lightly touched the small of her back, steadying her without crossing any line that would make her uncomfortable. "Relax," he said quietly. "You are safe beside me." Safe. The word nearly broke something inside her. Claire had spent years surviving, working double shifts, hiding overdue notices from Lily, pretending everything would somehow be okay. Safe was not a word people like her got to use. Across the ballroom, The blonde woman stared at Claire with disbelief and growing resentment. Another guest leaned toward her and whispered something urgently. Claire caught only 4 words before the music swallowed the rest. "He never touches anyone." Claire's heartbeat stumbled. Slowly, she turned toward Ethan again, only to realize he was already looking at her with the same unreadable intensity as before, as though he had been searching for her long before tonight ever began. People only respect kindness when power stands behind it. Claire felt the truth of that with every passing minute beside Ethan Calloway. The ballroom that had nearly swallowed her whole earlier now treated her like someone important simply because he allowed her near him. It was dizzying. Servers appeared the second her champagne glass emptied. Guests smiled too quickly when she glanced their way. Even the orchestra seemed softer somehow, as though the entire room had adjusted itself around Ethan's presence. Claire hated how easily the shift affected her. "You are thinking too loudly," Ethan said beside her. She looked up in surprise. "I did not realize thoughts made noise." "Yours do." His voice stayed calm, but there was something faintly amused beneath it now. Claire lowered her gaze quickly, trying to steady herself. The cameras still lingered nearby. Every few minutes, flashes lit the ballroom, while reporters whispered among themselves. She could already imagine tomorrow's headlines. Nobody would care about the charity fundraiser itself anymore. They would only care about the mystery woman standing beside Ethan Calloway. The thought made her chest tighten. "Mr. Calloway," she began carefully, "this attention is probably bad for you." "Ethan." She blinked. "What? If you are going to stand beside me all night, calling me Mr. Calloway will become exhausting." Claire let out the smallest nervous laugh before she could stop herself. It surprised both of them. Ethan looked at her for one brief second longer than necessary, and something unreadable flickered across his face again. "All night?" she asked softly. "That was not exactly part of my plan." "I know." The answer was simple. Too simple. That somehow made it more dangerous. Before Claire could respond, a sharply dressed couple approached them with practiced smiles. The man extended his hand immediately toward Ethan. "Good to see you again. We were hoping to discuss the Westbridge merger sometime next month." Ethan shook his hand once, polite but distant. The woman beside him turned toward Claire with obvious curiosity. "And how did you two meet?" Claire froze instantly. She had not prepared for that question because she still did not understand the answer herself. Ethan answered before the silence could become awkward. "At the right moment." The woman smiled uncertainly, clearly waiting for more explanation that never came. Ethan's ability to end conversations without sounding rude felt almost supernatural. The couple eventually drifted away, though not before glancing back twice. Claire exhaled slowly. "You do realize people are going to invent stories about me after tonight. They already started. That does not bother you." Ethan looked toward the ballroom crowd, expression unreadable. People with empty lives survive on rumors. Claire followed his gaze. Across the room, she noticed the blonde woman from earlier whispering intensely to 2 other guests while staring directly at her. The humiliation from before still lingered beneath Claire's skin, no matter how elegant the room looked now. She wondered how quickly respect disappeared once Ethan walked away. "You still want to leave?" Ethan observed quietly. Claire hesitated before nodding. "I do not belong here. Most people here do not belong here either. They just inherited confidence." The sentence caught her off guard. Ethan guided her toward a quieter balcony overlooking the city skyline before the reporters could approach again. Cold autumn air brushed against Claire's face the second they stepped outside. Manhattan glowed beneath them in rivers of gold and white light stretching for miles. For the first time all evening, Claire could breathe properly. "Better?" Ethan asked. "A little." He loosened his tie slightly, finally looking less like an untouchable billionaire and more like an actual human being. Yet even relaxed, he carried that same quiet authority that made entire rooms shift around him. Claire studied him carefully now that nobody else was close enough to interrupt. "You still have not answered my question." Ethan glanced toward her. "Which one?" "Why me?" The city noise hummed faintly below them while silence settled between them again. Claire suddenly regretted asking. But then Ethan looked at her with that same unsettling focus from earlier. "Because everyone else in that room saw your dress first," he said quietly. "I saw your eyes." Claire's heartbeat stumbled painfully. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Not since before Lily was born. Not since survival became more important than being seen. She looked away quickly toward the skyline, trying to hide the emotion rising unexpectedly in her chest. Ethan rested one hand lightly against the balcony railing beside her, close enough to feel protective without trapping her. "You are uncomfortable with attention," he said. "But you are not weak." Claire gave a faint smile. "You barely know me." "That is true." His voice lowered slightly. "Which makes it more interesting." The words sent warmth rushing through her despite the cold air. Before Claire could answer, the ballroom doors opened behind them. One of Ethan's assistants stepped outside looking tense. "Sir, the board members from Tokyo just arrived unexpectedly." Ethan's expression hardened almost immediately back into controlled professionalism. "Tell them I will join them shortly." The assistant nodded, then hesitated before glancing curiously toward Claire. Even his own staff looked confused by her presence. When the door closed again, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and handed Claire a black silk handkerchief. She looked down in confusion before realizing he was indicating the wine stain still visible on her dress. "You noticed that this whole time?" "I notice everything." Claire carefully pressed the silk fabric against the stain, but when she looked up again, Ethan was already studying her with the same impossible intensity that made her feel as though tonight was not the first time their paths had almost crossed. The hardest part about returning home after pretending to belong somewhere else is remembering how small your real life actually is. Claire held that thought quietly as the subway rattled beneath Manhattan, close to midnight. The black silk handkerchief Ethan had given her rested carefully inside her purse beside overdue utility notices and a folded prescription receipt she still could not afford to refill completely. Around her, exhausted strangers stared at their phones or slept against cold windows while the city lights blurred past outside. It felt impossible that only an hour earlier she had been standing beneath crystal chandeliers beside one of the most powerful men in New York. The memory already felt dangerous, like something borrowed from another woman's life. Claire stepped off the train 20 minutes later and walked 3 blocks through the chilly October air toward her apartment building in Queens. The neighborhood was quiet, except for distant sirens and the hum of traffic from the avenue. Her heels hurt badly enough now that she finally slipped them off before climbing the narrow stairs to the 3rd floor. The second she unlocked the apartment door, warmth and the faint scent of tomato soup greeted her. "Mommy," a sleepy little voice called immediately. Claire's entire body softened at once. "I am home, baby." Lily appeared from the hallway wearing pink pajamas covered in tiny stars, her blonde curls messy from sleep. The little girl ran straight into Claire's arms without hesitation. Claire hugged her tightly, closing her eyes for one fragile second as the stress of the night threatened to crush her all over again. "You stayed awake for me?" she whispered. Lily nodded seriously. "Miss Evelyn said rich people parties probably have chocolate fountains." Claire laughed softly for the first time all evening. "I did not see any chocolate fountains." Their elderly neighbor, Evelyn Parker, stepped out from the kitchen carrying a mug of tea. "I told her you would be home soon." Evelyn's kind eyes immediately noticed the wine stain on Claire's dress. "Long night." Claire forced a smile. "Something like that." After thanking Evelyn for watching Lily, Claire tucked her daughter into bed inside the tiny bedroom they shared. The apartment was barely 600 square feet, with old heating pipes that rattled constantly and kitchen cabinets that never closed properly. But Claire had spent years trying to make it feel safe for Lily. She adjusted the little girl's blanket carefully. "Did your chest hurt today?" she asked quietly. Lily shook her head. "Only a little after recess." Claire hid the worry in her eyes instantly. "Did you tell the school nurse?" "Yes." Lily studied her mother's face for a moment before asking softly, "Did something bad happen tonight?" Claire froze. Children always noticed more than adults expected. "Why would you ask that?" Lily reached toward the faint wine stain still visible on the dress. "Because you look sad behind your smile." The words nearly shattered her. Claire sat carefully on the edge of the bed and brushed hair away from Lily's forehead. "Some people were not very nice tonight. Because we are not rich." Claire looked down quietly. After a few seconds, Lily whispered the question that hurt even more. "Are rich people always cruel?" Claire swallowed hard before answering. "No, sweetheart. Not always." But even as she said it, Ethan's face appeared in her mind again. Calm gray eyes. Quiet voice. The strange way he looked at her as though he already knew pieces of her life she had never spoken aloud. Claire stood once Lily finally drifted to sleep. She moved into the kitchen and opened the drawer containing unpaid bills. Hospital notices. Cardiology appointments. Insurance warnings. The numbers blurred together after a while. She pressed both hands against the counter and tried to breathe steadily. The fundraiser tonight had mattered because she needed the overtime income desperately. If the hospital grant failed again this quarter, her department would cut staff. She could lose everything. Her phone buzzed suddenly against the counter. Claire frowned in confusion because almost nobody called her this late. The screen displayed an unknown Manhattan number. She hesitated before answering softly. "Hello, Miss Bennett," a professional male voice asked. "Yes. This is Daniel Reeves from Calloway Holdings. Mr. Calloway wanted to ensure you arrived home safely." Claire's heartbeat stopped for half a second. She glanced toward Lily sleeping in the next room. "He asked that." "Yes, ma'am." Claire struggled to find words. Nobody had checked whether she got home safely in years. "Please tell him I am fine." "Of course." The call should have ended there, but Daniel hesitated briefly. "There is one more thing." Claire tightened her grip on the phone. "What is it?" "Mr. Calloway requested a background file on the Ashton Foundation shortly after you left the gala." Claire frowned in confusion. "Why?" Silence stretched for one strange second. Then Daniel answered carefully. "He did not specify. But I have worked for him 11 years, Miss Bennett." Another pause followed. "He does not investigate people unless they matter." The most dangerous thing a lonely woman can hear is someone powerful saying, "I see you." Claire repeated that thought to herself the next morning while staring at her reflection in the small restroom mirror at the Ashton Foundation. The dark circles beneath her eyes looked deeper after only 3 hours of sleep, and no amount of makeup completely hid the exhaustion anymore. She adjusted her cardigan sleeves and forced herself to breathe normally before stepping back into the office hallway. But the second she opened the door, conversation stopped. Claire froze instantly. 3 coworkers standing near the coffee machine looked away too fast. One of them pretended to organize paperwork she had clearly been gossiping over moments earlier. Claire's stomach tightened. "What?" she asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately. Then her friend Melissa gave her a cautious look from across the room. "Claire, your picture is online." The world suddenly felt very still. Melissa turned her computer monitor slightly, and Claire saw it immediately. A photo from last night filled the screen. Ethan standing close beside her near the ballroom staircase, his hand wrapped around hers while cameras flashed around them. The headline underneath made her chest drop. "Mystery Woman Captures Ethan Calloway's Attention at Whitmore Gala." Claire stared silently while more articles loaded beside it. Speculation. Rumors. Questions about her identity. One article even zoomed in on the wine stain still visible on her dress. "People are disgusting," Melissa muttered softly. Claire barely heard her. Her phone buzzed repeatedly in her purse now with unknown numbers and messages from coworkers she had not spoken to in months. "I need air," Claire whispered. She escaped toward the stairwell before anyone could stop her. The cold concrete walls felt safer than the office, suddenly buzzing with whispers. Claire leaned against the railing and pressed trembling fingers to her forehead. This was exactly what she had feared. People like Ethan survived attention easily because they were born inside it. But people like her got destroyed by it. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Claire almost ignored it before answering carefully. "Hello. You left before I could ask whether your daughter likes pancakes." Claire's breath caught instantly. "Ethan." She closed her eyes briefly against the sound of his voice. Calm. Controlled. Somehow more dangerous over the phone than in person. "How did you get my number?" she asked softly. "You work for a foundation connected to 3 of my companies." It was not difficult. Claire almost laughed despite herself. That answer should probably alarm me. Did it? She hesitated. No. Silence settled briefly between them, though somehow it did not feel awkward. Claire hated how naturally his presence affected her already. "I saw the articles," she admitted quietly. "I am sorry if this causes problems for you." "It already is causing problems." Her chest tightened painfully. "I knew it." "Claire." His voice lowered slightly. "I was not talking about my problems." The words stole her breath again. She sat slowly on the stairwell steps before her knees could betray her completely. "You barely know me," she whispered. That sentence again. There was faint amusement in his voice now. "You keep saying it like it matters." Claire pressed her hand against her forehead. "You do not understand how different our worlds are." "I understand perfectly." "No, you do not." The response came out sharper than intended. Claire immediately regretted it. But Ethan remained calm. Then explain it to me. She looked down at the worn heels beside her feet. My daughter needs heart medication I cannot always afford on time. I take the subway because owning a car in this city feels impossible. My landlord raised rent again last month. And this morning half my office thinks I slept my way into your attention. Silence followed. Heavy this time. Claire realized too late she had revealed far too much. I should not have said that, she whispered. No, Ethan replied quietly. You should have. Something in his voice changed then. Softer. More focused. How old is your daughter? Claire frowned slightly at the sudden question. 5. Another silence. Then Ethan asked carefully, what is her name? Lily. Claire could hear faint city traffic on his side of the line. She imagined him somewhere high above Manhattan in a glass office overlooking the skyline while she sat hidden in a cramped stairwell, trying not to fall apart. Does she know about me? He asked unexpectedly. Claire blinked. Why would she? Children ask questions. Claire stared at the concrete floor before answering honestly. She asked if rich people are always cruel. Ethan said nothing for several seconds after that. When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded distant somehow. And what did you tell her? Claire remembered Lily's sleepy face beneath the apartment lamp. I told her not always. Another silence followed, but this one felt different. Personal somehow. Then Ethan spoke again, quieter than before. Good. Claire heard movement in the background on his end of the call. Papers shifting. A door closing. His voice returned calm and professional again almost instantly. I have meetings all afternoon. But there is something you should know before tonight. Claire frowned. Tonight. The rumors will get worse before they improve. Her pulse quickened immediately. What does that mean? It means Manhattan society does not like women they cannot classify. And me? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. They are terrified of you already. Before Claire could ask why, another voice spoke faintly near him, mentioning a board meeting beginning in 2 minutes. Ethan exhaled softly. I have to go. Claire tightened her grip on the phone unexpectedly. Ethan? Yes. She hesitated too long before finally whispering the question haunting her since the gala. Why does this feel like you were expecting to find me? Silence filled the line completely this time. So long that Claire wondered if the call dropped. Then Ethan answered in a voice so quiet it almost disappeared beneath the city noise around him. Because maybe I was. Sometimes the truth does not arrive like a confession. Sometimes it arrives like a man quietly memorizing every broken piece of your life. 3 days after the gala, Claire could no longer escape Ethan Calloway's presence even when he was nowhere near her. His name followed her through conversations, headlines, whispers in elevators, and the curious stares of strangers who suddenly recognized her face from online articles. At the grocery store, 2 women pretending to compare cereal boxes glanced at her repeatedly before one whispered, "That is her." Claire kept her eyes down and hurried toward the checkout line with discounted soup cans and Lily's medication refill clenched in her basket. By Friday afternoon, things became worse. Claire sat across from her supervisor inside the Ashton Foundation conference room, while rain streaked the windows overlooking the city. Richard Coleman adjusted his tie nervously before speaking. Claire, the board has concerns. Her stomach dropped instantly. Concerns about what? He sighed heavily. The publicity surrounding you and Mr. Calloway. Claire stared at him in disbelief. I did not ask for publicity. I know. His voice softened slightly. But donors are calling. Some believe the foundation is trying to leverage a personal relationship for financial influence. Claire almost laughed at the cruelty of it. Just days ago, those same wealthy people barely noticed she existed. Now suddenly they believe she had enough power to manipulate billionaires. There is no relationship, she said quietly. Richard avoided her eyes. I believe you. Unfortunately, public perception matters. Claire felt humiliation burn slowly through her chest all over again. So what happens now? Another painful pause. I think it would be best if you worked remotely for a while. The sentence landed softly, but it still felt like being pushed out of the only stable thing left in her life. Claire nodded once because dignity was all she had left to protect. 20 minutes later, she stood outside the building beneath gray October rain holding a cardboard box with framed photos, paperwork, and the coffee mug Lily painted for her last Christmas. New York moved around her without slowing down. Taxi horns, umbrellas, crowded sidewalks. Nobody noticed the woman trying not to cry beneath the storm clouds. Her phone buzzed inside her coat pocket. Ethan. Claire stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. How did you know? She asked quietly. Daniel informed me 10 minutes ago. Of course he knew. Powerful men always knew things too quickly. You had someone watching my office? She whispered. I had someone protecting your situation. Claire closed her eyes. Those are not the same thing. Rain soaked through her sleeves while silence stretched between them. Finally, Ethan spoke carefully. Where are you? Outside work. Stay there. Ethan, please. The single word surprised her more than anything else. Not command. Not control. Concern. 30 minutes later, a black car stopped beside the curb. Claire hesitated before climbing inside. Warm leather seats surrounded her immediately while soft jazz played quietly through hidden speakers. Ethan sat across from her in the back seat wearing a charcoal coat over a dark sweater, looking less like a billionaire today and more like a man who had not slept enough recently. His eyes moved instantly toward the cardboard box in her lap. Something cold flickered across his expression. They suspended you. It was not a question. Claire looked out the rain-covered window. Temporarily. Ethan remained silent for a long moment before asking, did they at least apologize? Claire let out a tired laugh. Rich organizations do not apologize. They hold meetings. The corner of Ethan's jaw tightened subtly. Claire noticed because she was starting to notice everything about him now. The quiet changes in his expression. The way he listened more carefully than anyone else ever had. The dangerous calm beneath his composure. I can fix this, he said finally. Claire turned toward him immediately. No, Claire. I do not want people thinking I survived because a billionaire rescued me. Ethan studied her carefully. And if he simply refuses to let you drown? Her breath caught again. The car continued moving through Manhattan while rain blurred gold streetlights outside into streaks of light. Claire looked down at the cardboard box in her lap. A corner of Lily's crayon drawing peeked out between paperwork. Ethan noticed it immediately. Did she make that? Claire nodded softly. She draws constantly when she is nervous. Like her mother? Claire looked up sharply. Ethan held her gaze steadily. You hide fear by pretending you can carry everything alone. The words struck too close to truth. You talk like you know me. Ethan looked away briefly toward the rain outside. I know enough. Claire's pulse quickened. What does that mean? Silence settled heavily inside the car. Ethan leaned back slowly against the seat, his expression unreadable again. 8 years ago, he said quietly, my mother collapsed during a charity fundraiser in Boston. Claire frowned slightly, confused by the sudden shift. Okay. Most people kept watching the auction. His eyes returned to hers now. One woman ignored everyone else and stayed beside her until the ambulance arrived. Claire's heartbeat slowed strangely. That is good, she said softly. Very few people stop when something inconvenient interrupts a wealthy room. Ethan stared at her with impossible intensity now. The woman disappeared before my family could thank her. Claire frowned deeper, trying to understand why this story suddenly felt important. Ethan's voice lowered almost to a whisper. But I never forgot her face. The rain outside seemed to vanish completely as Claire stared back at him in stunned silence. Then Ethan reached slowly into his coat pocket and placed an old folded photograph onto the seat between them. Claire looked down. The photo was grainy and slightly bent with age, taken outside a hospital emergency entrance at night. A younger version of herself stood beside a stretcher wearing a cheap red coat, exhausted and unaware someone had captured the moment at all. Some people spend years searching for the person who once saved them. And sometimes, when they finally find her, she is the one falling apart. Claire could not stop staring at the photograph lying between them in the back seat of Ethan's car. Rain tapped softly against the windows while Manhattan blurred past outside in streaks of silver and gold. But the entire world seemed frozen around that single image. Younger, tired, standing beside a hospital stretcher in a red coat she had bought from a discount rack years ago. Claire barely remembered that night anymore. I do not understand, she whispered. Ethan's gaze remained steady on her. My mother had a cardiac episode during a fundraiser in Boston. Most guests backed away because they were afraid of causing a scene. His jaw tightened slightly. You stayed. Claire looked down again at the photograph. Fragments of memory slowly returned. Cold rain outside the hospital. A frightened older woman struggling to breathe. Wealthy people staring without helping because nobody wanted discomfort interrupting their evening. Claire had simply done what felt natural at the time. I waited with her until family arrived, she said quietly. That was all. No, Ethan's voice lowered. It was not. Something in his tone made her chest ache unexpectedly. Claire glanced back toward him carefully. You remembered me for 8 years because I stayed beside your mother in a hospital? I remembered you because she spent the next 2 years talking about the young woman who treated her like a person instead of an inconvenience. Claire's breath caught softly. Ethan leaned back against the seat, eyes distant now as though replaying old memories privately. My mother had wealth her entire life. But after that night, she kept saying something strange. Claire swallowed. What? Ethan looked directly at her again. She said kindness sounds different when it comes from someone who knows suffering. Silence filled the car completely. Claire suddenly understood why Ethan looked at her the way he did. Not curiosity. Recognition. He had been carrying the memory of her far longer than she ever realized. Why did you never contact me? She asked softly. Ethan gave a faint, humorless smile. I tried. Claire frowned in confusion. What do you mean? The hospital refused to release your information. Security footage only gave us partial images. By the time my team tracked down the volunteer organization listed on your old badge, you had already moved to New York. Claire stared at him speechlessly. You searched for me? For a while. His voice remained calm, but something emotional flickered beneath the surface now. Then life became complicated. My mother died 3 years later. Claire felt immediate regret cross her face. I am sorry. Ethan nodded once, accepting the sympathy quietly. The night of the gala, he continued softly, I recognized you before you looked at me. Claire's pulse quickened all over again. Suddenly, everything made terrifying sense. The intensity in his eyes. The way he stepped toward her without hesitation. The feeling that he had already known something about her long before introductions happened. That is impossible, she whispered weakly. 8 years changes people. Not your eyes. The answer came immediately. Claire looked away first because the weight of his attention suddenly felt overwhelming. The car slowed near her apartment building, but neither of them moved. Rain continued falling outside in soft waves against the glass. You should not have involved yourself in my problems, Claire said quietly after a long silence. Your life was easier before me. Ethan almost looked offended by the statement. Do you really believe helping you is a burden? Claire laughed softly without humor. You already saw what happened to my job because of rumors. Then your job failed you. You cannot solve everything with power. No, Ethan agreed calmly. But I can solve some things. Before Claire could respond, her phone suddenly rang loudly inside the quiet car. She glanced at the screen and immediately answered. Miss Evelyn. Panic hit instantly from the elderly woman's trembling voice. Claire, sweetheart, do not panic, but Lily had trouble breathing after dinner. I brought her downstairs because I thought fresh air would help. But she looks pale. Claire's entire body went cold. Is she conscious? Yes, but she is very tired. Claire was already reaching for the door handle. I am coming right now. Ethan noticed the fear in her face immediately. What happened? Lily. Her voice shook despite every attempt to control it. Something is wrong. Ethan reacted instantly. Which hospital handles her cardiology? Claire blinked, startled by the directness. St. Matthew's Pediatric Center. Ethan spoke toward the front seat immediately. Change route. St. Matthew's. Now. The driver accelerated smoothly through traffic while Claire struggled to breathe properly. You do not have to come, she whispered. Ethan looked at her as though the suggestion itself made no sense. Claire. His voice stayed low and steady. You are not facing this alone tonight. The words nearly destroyed the fragile control she had left. Claire pressed trembling fingers against her mouth and stared down at the old photograph still resting beside her on the seat. For 8 years, Ethan Calloway had remembered a stranger who stayed beside his mother during her worst night. And now somehow, impossibly, he was staying beside her during hers. A person can survive humiliation, poverty, and loneliness. But fear for someone they love will destroy every wall they built to stay strong. Claire learned that again the second she rushed through the emergency entrance at St. Matthew's Pediatric Center. The bright hospital lights blurred together as nurses moved quickly through the hallway, and distant monitors echoed softly through the building. Claire spotted Lily immediately sitting on a hospital bed wrapped in a small gray blanket, looking pale and exhausted beside Miss Evelyn. Relief hit so hard Claire nearly collapsed beside her daughter. Mommy. Lily's tiny voice sounded weak but calm. Claire gathered her carefully into her arms. I am here, sweetheart. I am right here. Ethan remained several steps behind them, silent and watchful, allowing Claire the moment without interruption. But nurses noticed him instantly anyway. People always noticed Ethan Calloway. A young doctor entered carrying a tablet and offered Claire a reassuring smile. Her oxygen levels stabilized quickly. We believe stress and exhaustion triggered the episode. Claire nodded shakily while brushing Lily's curls away from her forehead. Is she okay? She needs monitoring tonight. The doctor hesitated before continuing gently. We should also discuss scheduling the next cardiac procedure sooner than originally planned. Fear clenched through Claire's chest immediately. How much sooner? Within the next few weeks would be ideal. Claire lowered her gaze because she already knew what came next. More bills. More impossible choices. More pretending she could carry this alone. Ethan quietly stepped closer then. Doctor, he said calmly, what does she need? The doctor looked slightly startled by the direct question. Additional imaging tests first, then potentially surgery depending on progression. Ethan nodded once. Arrange everything necessary. Claire turned toward him instantly. No, Ethan's attention shifted back to her. Claire, I said no. Her voice cracked from exhaustion and emotion. You cannot just solve my life with money. Lily looked between them quietly from the hospital bed while rain tapped softly against the windows outside. Ethan lowered his voice carefully. This is not about pride. It is exactly about pride. Claire stood slowly, trying to steady herself. You already helped too much. Ethan's expression remained calm, but disappointment flickered briefly in his eyes. Helping your daughter breathe easier is not too much. The sentence nearly broke her completely. Claire turned away before he could see tears gathering in her eyes. She hated how vulnerable she felt around him now. Hated how easily he reached the fragile places inside her she spent years protecting. A nurse entered moments later carrying paperwork. Miss Bennett, insurance approval delayed part of Lily's medication refill from last month. We will need updated authorization before discharge tomorrow. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Of course. There was always another problem waiting. I understand, she whispered. Ethan quietly took the clipboard from the nurse before Claire could reach for it. His eyes scanned the forms once. Then his expression changed. Subtle. Dangerous. These prescriptions were delayed because of cost? Claire immediately looked away. Silence answered for her. Ethan slowly lowered the paperwork. How long? Ethan, how long? His voice remained calm, but something underneath it felt sharp now. Claire swallowed hard. A few months. Ethan stared at her like he could not understand what he was hearing. You delayed heart medication for yourself? For Lily. Claire corrected quietly. There is a difference. Ethan looked genuinely angry for the first time since meeting her. Not at her. At the situation itself. Why did nobody help you? Claire almost laughed at the question. Because this is America, she whispered tiredly. People survive quietly every day until they stop surviving quietly enough. Ethan looked away briefly, jaw tight. Then without another word, he stepped into the hallway and pulled out his phone. Claire could hear only fragments of the conversation through the partially open door. Tomorrow morning. Pause. No, I do not care what meetings move. Another pause. Find the best pediatric cardiology team in the state. Claire closed her eyes. He was doing it again. Taking control of chaos as though the world naturally rearranged itself around his decisions. 20 minutes later, Lily finally drifted asleep while soft rain continued outside the hospital windows. Miss Evelyn had gone home to rest, leaving the room unusually quiet now except for monitor sounds and distant footsteps in the hallway. Claire sat beside the bed, watching her daughter breathe carefully beneath the blankets. You should sleep too, Ethan said quietly from the chair near the window. Claire looked toward him. His coat rested beside him now, tie loosened, exhaustion visible beneath his composed expression. Yet somehow he still looked completely steady, like the kind of man storms moved around instead of through. Why are you still here? She asked softly. Ethan looked genuinely confused by the question. Because you are here. Claire felt tears threaten again immediately. You barely know how to stop saying things like that. And you barely know how to believe them. Silence settled between them again. Different now. Softer. More dangerous. Claire looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully between them. I spent years teaching myself not to need anyone, she admitted quietly. Ethan's gaze never left her face. That sounds exhausting. Claire let out a shaky breath that almost became a laugh. It is. Ethan stood slowly then and walked toward the hospital bed. He adjusted Lily's blanket with surprising gentleness before looking back at Claire. You do not have to do it anymore. The words hit her harder than anything else he had ever said. Claire looked at him standing beneath the pale hospital lights with quiet certainty in his gray eyes. And for the first time in years, the loneliness she carried so carefully began to feel dangerously close to breaking apart. Then her phone suddenly buzzed loudly against the chair beside her. Claire frowned and picked it up. Her blood turned cold instantly. The message contained only one sentence from an unknown number. Stay away from Ethan Calloway before you destroy him too. The people who try hardest to separate two souls are usually the ones terrified they belong together. Claire stared at the anonymous message glowing on her phone screen, while the hospital room suddenly felt colder around her. Stay away from Ethan Calloway before you destroy him too. Her fingers tightened instinctively around the device. Ethan noticed the shift in her expression immediately. What is it? Claire hesitated for half a second before handing him the phone silently. Ethan read the message once. His face revealed almost nothing, but something dangerous settled quietly behind his eyes. Do you know who sent it? Claire asked softly. Ethan handed the phone back calmly. I have a few guesses. This does not bother you. No, his answer came too quickly. Threats only matter when I believe them. Claire looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully beneath pale hospital blankets. Maybe they are right. Ethan's expression sharpened immediately. Do not say that. Your world already started turning against me. Her voice trembled slightly from exhaustion. I lost my position at work. People think I manipulated you. And now strangers are warning me to disappear before I ruin your life too. Ethan stepped closer slowly, lowering his voice so carefully it almost hurt to hear. Claire, look at me. She did. You did not ruin anything. The certainty in his eyes nearly shattered her remaining defenses. Claire looked away first because believing him felt far too dangerous now. Morning arrived slowly through the hospital windows. By sunrise, Ethan had already arranged specialists, consultations, and expedited testing for Lily without once making Claire feel like charity. Somehow he treated every decision as though helping her daughter was the most natural thing in the world. Nurses moved differently around him. Administrators answered calls. Immediately, problems disappeared before Claire even voiced them aloud. It terrified her how safe that felt. Around noon, while Lily rested during additional scans, Ethan brought coffee into the waiting area, where Claire sat quietly staring at insurance paperwork. You have not eaten, he observed. Claire accepted the coffee carefully. I forgot. Ethan sat beside her, close enough for warmth, but never close enough to pressure her. You cannot survive entirely on worry and caffeine. Claire gave a tired laugh. I have been proving otherwise for years. Ethan studied her silently for a moment. You should come stay at my townhouse while Lily recovers. Claire nearly dropped the coffee cup. Absolutely not. Why? Because people already think I am using you. People think many foolish things. Claire shook her head immediately. Ethan, your life is controlled by headlines and investors and social circles that would never accept someone like me. Someone kind, someone poor. Silence settled heavily between them. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair, watching her carefully. Do you know the first thing my mother taught me about wealthy people? Claire frowned. What? That money only reveals character. It does not create it. Claire looked down at the coffee trembling faintly in her hands. You say beautiful things too easily. No, Ethan replied quietly. I just spent too many years wishing I had found you sooner. Her breath caught again. Every conversation with him felt like standing too close to something powerful enough to change her entire life. Before Claire could respond, footsteps echoed sharply through the waiting area. The blonde woman from the Gala approached them wearing a cream designer coat and expensive sunglasses despite the cloudy weather outside. Claire immediately recognized her. The humiliation from that night rushed back instantly. The woman stopped several feet away, her eyes moving coldly between them. Ethan. He stood slowly, expression unreadable. Victoria. So this was the woman's name. Victoria crossed her arms elegantly. Your board is furious. Then they can schedule another meeting. Her jaw tightened subtly before she turned toward Claire. You should know what kind of chaos follows him. Claire remained silent. Victoria stepped closer. Men like Ethan do not belong to ordinary lives. Eventually women like you get crushed trying to keep up. Ethan's voice cut through the room instantly. Calm. Sharp. Final. That is enough. Victoria looked stunned for half a second. I am trying to protect you. No, Ethan said quietly. You are trying to control what you do not understand. The waiting room had gone completely silent around them now. Nurses pretended not to stare while patients glanced up from magazines. Victoria looked directly at Claire again. Do you really think his world will ever make room for you? Claire opened her mouth uncertainly, but Ethan answered first. It already has. The sentence landed like thunder wrapped in velvet. Victoria's face lost color immediately. Ethan, Claire stays where she is respected, he continued calmly. Anyone unable to manage that can remove themselves from our lives permanently. Claire stared at him in stunned silence. Not because he defended her again, but because he said our lives without hesitation. Victoria looked at Ethan for several painful seconds before finally turning away and walking toward the exit in cold silence. The second she disappeared, the tension inside the waiting room shifted completely. Claire slowly looked up at Ethan. You should not keep doing that. Doing what? Choosing me publicly. Ethan looked genuinely confused by the concern. Claire, I chose you the first night I saw you 8 years ago. Her heartbeat stopped completely. Ethan stepped closer now, lowering his voice carefully. The only difference is that now you finally know. Claire could not breathe properly for one dangerous second. Everything around them faded into hospital noise and pale afternoon light, and the impossible steadiness in Ethan Calloway's eyes. Then a small, sleepy voice interrupted softly from the hallway nearby. Mommy. Claire turned instantly. Lily stood there holding a nurse's hand after her scans, looking exhausted but smiling faintly. Ethan moved beside Claire automatically as both of them walked toward the little girl. Together. And for the first time since life began breaking apart around her, Claire realized something terrifyingly beautiful. She was no longer walking toward hardship alone.